Expressing a judgment in Formula One is a very complex exercise. Unfortunately, Ferrari lost again in 2024, McLaren won, and so did Max Verstappen. Over the past weeks, we evaluated the various drivers concerning their performances throughout the recently concluded season. Similarly, multiple factors must be considered when evaluating teams. However, basing the assessment on measurable criteria makes the judgment less tied to subjective perceptions, no matter how objective these may be. We thus considered 5 rationales for assessing the season of the 10 teams, aware that there might be other equally important factors not examined because they lack clear evidence. As we will see in the summary, the final evaluation, through assigning scores for each criterion, aligns closely with the final standings of the Constructors' Championship. In the first section, we assessed the baseline specifications of the cars at the start of the past campaign. There is no doubt that Red Bull arrived at the starting line with a car that was just as dominant as it had been at the end of the 2023 season. The absolute value of the RB20 in the early stages of the season was demonstrated by Sergio Perez, who finished second in 3 of the first 4 rounds. The strongest alternative to the Austrian team was Scuderia Ferrari, thanks to Carlos Sainz's victory in Australia and consistent performance. The McLaren MCL38, before the Chinese Grand Prix, did not seem capable of troubling Red Bull, even though its baseline appeared to be excellent. Mercedes seemed a step behind its competitors, leading the midfield but far from challenging its direct rivals. From the Bahrain tests, it was clear that the Aston Martin AMR24 was a shadow of its excellent predecessor, and for Fernando Alonso, the podiums of 2023 would be hard to replicate. It was total darkness for Alpine and Sauber, as well as for Williams. Although not a strictly measurable criterion, the title of Most Improved Team undoubtedly goes to McLaren. From Imola onward, the papaya-colored car was, on average, the most competitive in the field. This success was due to a development plan that unlocked the enormous potential of the Woking car. The exact opposite occurred at Red Bull. The RB20 suddenly seemed like a car with no development margin, having reached the physiological limit of the aerodynamic paradigm refined since 2022. The car's development failed to keep pace with the competition. The peak in Qatar is the hope Milton Keynes engineers cling to for 2025. For Ferrari, the development of the SF24 remains the great regret, but also an excellent demonstration of the strength of the team led by Frédéric Vasseur. The technical Project 676 started without significant flaws. However, the car's upgrade path was abruptly halted by the failed update introduced at the Spanish Grand Prix. The Iberian round was the first in one of the season's triple headers. This issue ultimately prevented the engineers of the historic Italian team from quickly understanding the correlation problem between the virtual environment and on-track performance. The Italian team deserves credit for not panicking, starting again from a point of consistency and redeveloping the Ferrari SF24. The result was admirable. After many years, the Modena-based team continued developing the car and gradually improved the performance of the 676 technical project until the end of its life cycle. As for Mercedes, despite the 4 victories obtained during the season, thanks to favorable circumstances, as was the case in Austria, and cold climatic conditions in which the Silver Arrows were undoubtedly the best cars on the track, the feeling is that Toto Wolff's team still has not figured out how to make a wing car work across a broader range of conditions. Noteworthy is the work done by Alpine, a team that was practically at the back of the grid at the start of the season. Thanks to updates designed for the A525 project, Gasly and Ocon managed to regain positions in the midfield, crowned by a double podium in the rain-soaked Brazilian Grand Prix. Regarding the criterion related to reliability, it considered the number of homologated power unit elements during the season grid penalties, due to exceeding the regulatory limits on components and race retirements caused by technical issues. In terms of reliability, McLaren was the undisputed leader. Despite an extended calendar, the Woking cars never retired, with Norris still classified in the Austrian Grand Prix despite the damaging collision with Max Verstappen. McLaren and Aston Martin were the only teams not requiring any homologation of power unit components exceeding the prescribed limits. Much credit goes to Mercedes for producing the most reliable engine in the field. The Red Bull powertrains unit showed some issues with the internal combustion engine, forcing the world champion to homologate 6 internal combustion units. For Ferrari, the Achilles heel was undoubtedly the energy store affecting both the factory team and its customer teams. Lastly, Alpine struggled again this year with technical issues on the Renault power unit despite regulatory continuity. The 2025 season will mark the swan song for the French engine, which will be replaced by the Mercedes power unit. A clarification is needed regarding Williams' data, the number of power unit components exceeding the regulatory cap, and the grid penalties were mainly due to severe crashes caused by Sargent Albon and Colapinto, which forced the team to homologate new components and rebuild entirely destroyed cars. This criterion also assessed not just the driver's on-track management, but also the ability to handle contractual complexities during a season marked by a lively driver market. Despite winning the constructors' title unexpectedly before the season began, McLaren's driver management fell short for a team with the potential to support Norris's championship dream. Lando's errors, often stemming from the psychological battle with Verstappen, and the freedom granted to the drivers until the Monza Grand Prix were questionable. Ensuring equal treatment for as long as possible is understandable. However, in some instances, the approach by Stella's team appeared to be a sporting suicide. Conversely, Frédéric Vasseur skillfully managed internal rivalry between the two drivers, one of whom was sidelined just before the season started. There was great maturity from everyone, including Leclerc, who navigated his relationship with his teammate, mending rifts that arose during certain races, Las Vegas in particular. At Red Bull, driver management was poor due to retaining a driver who was no longer performing. Perez was overshadowed by Max, and his performances cannot be justified by the car's technical decline. For the first time in its history, Red Bull appeared beholden to a driver, with a contract that protected him until the season's end. Jacobi, Checo's longtime manager, held the team in check, likely preventing an easy dismissal of the driver as rumored before the summer break. The same applies to Daniel Ricciardo, who was probably given more time than warranted, taking valuable kilometers away from Liam Lawson. Mercedes also excelled in driver management, despite Sir Lewis Hamilton's unexpected move. Though doubts surrounded some lackluster performances, Hamilton remained mostly composed in 2024. The situation at Williams was much more complex. After parting ways with Sargent belatedly, the team brought in Colapinto, who showed speed and natural aggression. However, his occasional reckless errors worsened the team's financial situation. He was fast, challenged Albon, and appealed to a broad market. However, he will sit out 2025 as his seat has already been handed to Carlos Sainz. In terms of pit stops, Ferrari is on the podium in tire changes. This score was the easiest to assign, referencing the season's DHL summary rankings. Once again, the top teams dominated this special ranking, particularly Red Bull. One of the positives for Milton Keynes this season was their on-track work, not only in pit stops, which highlighted the mechanic's skill, but also as a strategic weapon that the team used to compensate for the car's evident shortcomings in various circumstances. McLaren and Ferrari completed the podium, highlighting the overall progress of both teams, including in on-track operations.